China is done playing nice, and from Beijing's perspective, the US is making some moves that are both an insult and an economic threat. The United States is tightening its grip, and Beijing sees this as a dangerous game. While many focus on the trade war, there's something even bigger unfolding: the sell-off of Panama's ports. If this deal goes through, it could reshape global trade dynamics and put China in a position of greater dependence on US influence. This isn't just a business deal, it's an economic power grab. Let's dive into why this matters, how China is responding, and what it means for the future of global trade. When we talk about the US-China struggle, tariffs often come to mind. But there's a more critical issue happening at sea. The US is strategically targeting China's trade routes, trying to cut off key global shipping routes and make Chinese trade more vulnerable to American control. The latest chess move: Hutchison, a Hong Kong-based company, is trying to sell off its massive port holdings, 43 ports across the globe. BlackRock, the American financial titan, is ready to purchase them. This isn't just about a corporate deal, it's a power play. The US could gain control over critical shipping routes, and that spells disaster for China's supply chain. If the sale happens, the US could apply economic pressure on China like never before. Ports are the lifeblood of global trade, where goods are loaded and unloaded. Losing access to these strategic ports would severely impact China's ability to move goods around the world. Let's zero in on the Panama Canal. It's essential to global trade, with 75% of its traffic going to US ports. If the US gains control over these ports, they could impose fees, tariffs, or restrictions on Chinese vessels, making trade far more expensive and disrupting China's economic flow. This is a game changer. It's not just about the goods being sold today, but about the future ability to access markets worldwide. Here's where it gets even worse. The US is considering new fees of up to $1.5 million on Chinese-built ships entering US ports. Whether you call it a sanction, tariff, or extortion, the outcome is the same: Chinese exporters would take a massive financial hit. Considering China builds more than a third of the world's ships, this could result in billions for the US, while crippling China's export industry. For Hutchison, the sale to BlackRock seems like a win, netting them $19 billion. But for China, this is an existential threat. In retaliation, Beijing has reportedly instructed state-owned firms to stop doing business with Li Ka-shing, the billionaire behind Hutchison. While this won't bankrupt Hutchison overnight, it could severely impact their future in China, one of the world's fastest-growing economies. At this point, it's unclear whether the deal will go through, but China is fighting back hard. Losing control over key ports would give the US an unprecedented amount of power, and Beijing won't let that happen easily. More than half of global ship deliveries come from Chinese vessels, and if China's ships are penalized at US-controlled ports, it could cause widespread damage to China's shipbuilding industry. So, why is the US doing this? They believe they can leverage their control over these ports to manipulate trade terms and weaken China's position. But China has been diversifying its trade relationships for years. While the US is focusing on tariffs, China is shifting away from dependence on American trade. They've increased partnerships with Russia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the UAE, all countries either in the BRICS group or closely aligned with China. Despite the rhetoric, China is less dependent on US trade than many think. In fact, exports to the US account for less than 2% of China's GDP. Even if the US completely halts trade with China, the impact on China's economy would be far less significant than the US might hope. On the other hand, countries like Vietnam and Mexico, whose economies are heavily dependent on trade with the US, would feel the brunt of any economic measures far more acutely than China. Meanwhile, the US is making key strategic mistakes. The recent cuts in foreign aid programs may save money short-term, but they also open the door for China to step in and strengthen relationships. When the US canceled aid projects in Cambodia, China quickly filled the gap, cementing its influence in the region. These moves may seem like small victories for the US, but they could have long-term consequences that benefit China. Will China sell TikTok to ease tariffs? It's unlikely. Giving in would set a dangerous precedent, signaling that China could be blackmailed into selling off its technology assets. And if China gives in now, what's next? Alibaba, Temu. There's a risk that US demands will never stop. At the same time, the US is starting to realize the value of Chinese tech. TikTok is more than just a social media app, it's an economic powerhouse with over 100 million US users. The desperation to control platforms like TikTok reveals a deeper drive for digital dominance, and China has made it clear that it's not willing to give up that power. While the media often portrays China as a declining power, the reality is much more complex. The country is still thriving, and influential figures like Speed have helped change perceptions by showcasing modern-day China. The narrative is shifting, and people are beginning to see that the situation is far from bleak. In conclusion, the battle over trade, ports, and digital influence is just heating up. The US is attempting to seize strategic assets, but China has a plan of its own, one that involves leveraging its relationships and reducing dependence on the US. The real question is whether the US will succeed in gaining control of these critical assets, or if China will find a way to push back and retain its position of power. The stakes are incredibly high, and the global economy hangs in the balance. What do you think? Will China sell TikTok, or will they push back against US economic pressure? Will the Panama port deal go through? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more insights right here on Profit Powerhouse.